Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here. Welcome back to another video for Godfall, and today I want to talk a bit more about loot, more specifically the kind of different loot items that we'll be earning, and I also want to touch a bit more on Endgame since that is one of the most important questions people keep asking. People want to know about what we have to do at the end game, and while we still have a lot of stuff to find out, there was actually an interview that I completely missed about a week ago where Dick Kane was speaking with Gamebite, and he spoke about a few of the sort of, loot aspects, the different sort of loot vectors, so to speak, and also about some of the stuff we'll be doing in Endgame. So I thought I'd kind of wrap that up today for those of you guys that maybe want some more questions answered. So if you guys do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you have any questions, and of course be sure to keep it locked because we are getting incredibly close now. I cannot wait to jump in and play this game, so if you're excited for Godfall, then stick around, you're in the right place. But let's start off by talking about loot first, because if you guys caught my most recent video, then you'll know that we got to look at this screen here, which is our first chance to take a look inside the menus and actually see what, what the kind of tinkering aspect of Godfall will be like. So we get a look at the loot screen, we also get a look at some of the skill screens, different things like that. If you missed my recent video, I'll link it down below because that goes over all that stuff in greater detail. But talking about the loot, there are multiple different layers to the loot. There's kind of sort of broken down into 5 different core layers. So your layer number 1 is of course weapons. Weapons will be the primary thing. Well, I mean, you're going to be chasing all this stuff, but weapons will be like the number 1 thing you are chasing. There are over 120 unique weapons in Godfall across the 5 weapon classes, and in my recent interview with Dick Kane, who is of course the senior technical producer at Counterplay Games, he did actually mention that of course every single weapon in the game will have lore associated with it. Every weapon has a primary trait that is completely unique to that weapon, along with a secondary trait that are rolled from a pool of shared traits. So these are some of the kind of randomized elements. Players can then equip up to 2 weapons in their loadout. We know that. And again, going back to the inventory screen, we can of course see slot number 1 and number 2 for the weapons. So that's layer number 1, weapons, over 120 unique items in the game. Following on from there, we then have your trinkets. There are 3 types of trinkets. We have amulets, rings, and charms. And much like weapons, every trinket will have a unique primary trait associated with it, and players can equip 2 rings, 1 amulet, and 1 charm in their loadout. So those are the things that, visually you won't see them, but they're still going to be incredibly important to your build. Following on from there, layer number 3 is the Lifestone. Similar to other pieces of loot, the Lifestone has a primary and a secondary trait. However, this particular piece is unique because it also serves as the player's self-heal. They said there's some really neat kind of loot triggers tied to Lifestones that make kind of self-preservation a sort of balancing act in Godfall. Players can equip 1 Lifestone in their loadout, and Lifestones have a set number of charges, and charges are restored through combat. So basically, it's going to be one of those things that you're going to need it because you're going to need it for healing, but it's going to be interesting when you think about different aspects of Godfall loot. We've spoken about this again in a previous interview where lots of these things happen on triggers. It might be, say, based on getting a breach or getting like a soul shatter. Like imagine if you have like a breach build and you then have like a Lifestone that has a trigger on breach. Might be one of those ones where you can play super aggressively, get the kills, and then heal yourself in the process. That kind of thing. So definitely pretty interesting. Outside of that, we've seen some of this stuff deployed in the gameplay. Layer number 4 is the Battle Banner. Battle Banners are another sort of charge-based piece of loot, similar to the Lifestone, and when you place them down, these banners can either provide you with buffs to yourself and your nearby allies, or debuffs to nearby enemies. Battle Banners are one of the most powerful co-op tools that a player will have, because of course, keep in mind, if you're playing in that 3-player co-op setup and everybody drops banners down that stack together, you could have some pretty powerful combinations. Of course, still going to be very useful in solo. And then your final layer of loot, so to speak, are the Augment constellations. The Augment constellation is essentially the empty skill grid that the player fills in themselves, and they fill these with augments, which are again unique pieces of loot that provide incredibly powerful benefits. Now keep in mind this is separate to the actual skill grid that you spend your skill points in. The Augment constellations are these screens, and of course these are the augments you will slot into those. And again, don't forget that I spoke about this in a recent interview. The Augment constellation is different on each Valor plate. Some of them will lean more into one particular style. You'll notice there are different color nodes. Red is for might, green is for vitality, blue is for spirit, and anything that is white can basically take any color. So again, if you have, say, one Valor plate that leans more so into like attack, you'll have like a heavy bias towards, say, red, might, constellations. Meanwhile, some of the other ones might be more balanced, and that kind of falls within the different categories of the Valor plates. So, depending on, say, the build you want to make, the kind of style that you want to play, then you may well lean more towards different Valor plates, not only based on just their play style, but also based on their constellation. So, that is incredibly exciting. However, let's move on to talk a bit about Endgame, because this is ultimately, in these kind of games, the thing that will keep us coming back, keep us sort of playing for a long time. I do like to kind of remind people on like a regular basis, Godfall is not a game as a service, but it is a game that does still have some endgame content, some things for us to grind. So, with that being said, Dick Hayne mentioned in the interview that their aim is to create engaging endgame loops that will continue to challenge and reward players, and the battle is not over once you defeat Macross. They said one example of this is a thing called the Tower of Trials, which is a roguelike endgame challenge mode that you access within the monolith, and it can be played both solo and in co-op. As players complete the combat trials and progress up the elevator in the central monolith, the enemies will get stronger. However, they said that luckily players can earn boons and item rewards on their way up. So that's pretty cool. But to go a little bit deeper, he then said that players will first complete the elevator encounter trial by defeating waves of enemies to be rewarded with keys, which is a currency specific to the Tower of Trials. And this will then get reset to 0 when the player exits Tower of Trials. Players can then choose the type of rewards that they want to earn by picking the doorway within the corresponding reward type's icon. So if you imagine it, you're collecting keys, you're progressing through, you get to choose the direction you want to go, that kind of thing. There are several types of reward types that the player can earn, but only if they walk through the doorway and sort of defeat that room encounter trial. So I guess in that respect, sort of similar to if any of you guys have played like Hades recently, you'll know that, in some of the rooms you'll have options to choose depending on where you want to go, and then if you complete that room, you get the reward associated with that. That kind of feeling, which is actually a really cool system. I like it. You do sometimes get that choice where you're like, I want to go through both doors, but alas, you need to make a choice. They then want to say that the room encounter trial will offer different types of gameplay to the elevator trials, and it won't have like a time limit, and it will have an arena space which is larger than the elevator encounter. We've seen the elevator stuff in sort of some of the gameplay clips, this sort of small segmented area where you sort of need to survive for a little bit, that kind of thing. And one other thing that you'll notice as you're progressing through is that there'll be many times where a chest that requires a number of keys can spawn as well on top of everything else you've done. So assuming that you've kind of gathered enough along the way, then you may be able to get some bonus loot in the process. Now, for the time being, of course, that is just like a glimpse at some of the stuff we'll be doing. They have, of course, teased there are, multiple different things to look forward to. So as and when we get further details on like, what else we get to do endgame-wise, then I will again keep you guys up to date. But for the time being, that is a quick kind of insight into one of the things that we'll be doing endgame, which again, I honestly really like the sound of that. It sounds like a lot of fun, especially if you're playing that in co-op. However, there are a couple more things I do want to touch on very quickly. Recently, the official PlayStation Twitter account dropped an article, and they actually touched on kind of the speed of the console and how like the fast load screens will actually allow you to get back in the action quite quickly. We get our first look at the death screen in Godfall. You'll see that when you get defeated by this boss, you die very quickly, and within literally about 3 seconds, you are back in facing the boss. So, I know this is one of those more sort of technical things that Sony wants to talk about with their PlayStation, but regardless, the ability to kind of just dive back in so quickly because of the, the SSD is actually quite nice. But for the time being, that is pretty much it. That was a quick update on some of the new Godfall information that came from an interview. Again, as always, let me know what you guys are thinking down below. Let me know if you guys have got any more burning questions, anything else I can try and help answer as we get close to launch. But safe to say, I'm excited. Every time I see more and more from this game, I just get even more excited, so I can't wait to jump in and start messing around with builds, start messing around with the valor plates, and just sort of seeing what else there is to do. So, for the time being, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there if you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with. It's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.